What did she say? It was a Saturday afternoon and we had company. Jenny and her husband Trev had been our friends since we moved to Houston. We went out to dinner with them, to neighborhood parties and to each other's houses after a movie or outing. They were the same age as us, mid-30s, all of us college graduates dealing with college debt careers and occasional separations due to Trev and my wife Debbie's business travels. Deb was getting ready for one of them, and Trev had just left our house for the airport to head to the West Coast, which was his territory. It was our way of life they traveled, and we kept the home fires burning. Jenny and I worked as an accountant and an architect, respectively. Our traveling was minimal, if not infrequent. Most of the time, only one of the two couples had a traveling spouse. When that happened, the other spouse would visit the couple in town for dinner or a weekend picnic, after Trev said goodbye and took a cab to the airport. I let the girls chat in the kitchen and went to the garage. I cleaned my workbench and then checked out the security system we'd spent good money on. After the recent robberies in our subdivision, we had microphones and cameras in every room that fed the server in the attic connecting to our cloud account, saved everything that was captured when each device was activated by motion sensors. I could check any room with a phone app or any computer I could log on to out of habit. I checked to see if it was working. "How was your last trip?" Jenny asked my wife Debbie as they sat at the kitchen table, the usual Debbie giggled work, dinner, the bar, and then eventually a little sleep. Is it true what they say about people who wiggle away from their families on business trips? Jenny was clearly worried about her husband. My wife was quiet for a moment before answering a meaningful second pause. "I wouldn't worry too much, Jen," my wife replied, taking a sip of her drink. "Trev always comes back to your house, doesn't he? Yes. But I wonder what he does when he's alone. If he alone, Jen," her wife reassured her, "he comes home to you. Don't pay attention to what happens when he's away." "What do you mean, Deb?" "Exactly what I said," my wife replied. "What happens outside the house means nothing." I was shocked as my wife's words bounced up and down in my head. What happens outside the house means nothing. What happens when people aren't home? That doesn't mean anything. What happened when people are away from home means nothing. Did she really say that? I asked myself. "Debbie, what are you saying?" Jenny asked anxiously. But by now Debbie had become quieter and more composed. "Nothing, Jan," she replied cautiously, "only that you're worrying for nothing. Trev loves you to death. He comes home to you and loves you. His trips are just business, nothing more." I could see that Jenny wasn't reassured by Debbie's remark, but she politely allowed my wife to change the subject. I let them chat for a while before I went back into the kitchen and poured myself a cup of coffee. After what I had heard, I wanted my mind to be clear after another 40 minutes of small talk. Jenny drove home and we settled in for the night. I was polite to my wife, but cautious to say her words made me nervous would be an understatement. As she went upstairs to take a shower, various thoughts crossed my mind. Had she cheated while she was away? Had she really done it many times? Had she only done it once recently, weeks or months ago? But the way she said it spoke volumes. Her comment wasn't a thoughtful introspection. In fact, there was no consternation or disapproval in her tone, just a statement of fact. An acceptance of it is what it is without any disapproval. What am I supposed to do? What does any man do? Can I say just a few words to her? Would I throw 4 years of marriage away? We were thinking of having children. Did she have sex when she traveled? How could I be sure the child would be mine? Then I thought she usually traveled to Phoenix, San Diego. Seattle and Omaha, did she have lovers in each location? Or did she only have one lover? Was he prettier, fatter, longer? None of these thoughts made me horny. Instead, I felt only disappointment, anxiety, and sadness. The woman I loved was cheating on me as much as I wanted to be wrong. The logical part of my mind argued otherwise. My wife, Debbie, had spoken up and exposed her infidelity. I didn't sleep with her that night. She came down to get me. But I acted like I was sleeping on the couch with my face buried in the pillows. She tried to wake me up, but I was in a deep sleep, and eventually she gave up, not caring to turn around to face her. I stayed in that position until I fell into a restless sleep until morning. The first thing I smelled when I started to wake up was the smell of coffee and the sound of footsteps and sandals into the kitchen. I opened one eye and saw a cup of coffee on the table. Anxious, I said nothing and didn't move from my seat, but I realized I was only delaying the inevitable when I opened my eyes. Debbie was standing beside the couch, wearing only sandals and a robe. Her blonde hair fell over her right shoulder as she looked at me thoughtfully. I glanced over and stood up, ignoring the coffee. She threw a worried look at me as I silently walked past. Locking the bathroom door, I started brushing my teeth. Creaking Noisnos from behind the door told me she was standing outside, but then they fell silent. We hadn't said a word to each other all morning. I was glad because I wasn't ready to talk to her. I wasn't afraid to face her. If anything, I was looking forward to it. But I had to know for sure. First, I needed information that was my nature. I never took a single step without knowing the score. Grabbing my laptop, I settled into the study in the corner of our living room. It was a desk that faced the living room from the corner, and I could work so she couldn't see the screen. Debbie passed by from the bedroom to the kitchen a few times, but kept her distance from me. The silence made me angry. Why didn't she ask me what was wrong? Was this part of her game calming down? I focused on finding private investigators in the city she traveled to after filling out forms and writing descriptions of what I needed to do. I used my personal credit card to hire 4 detective agencies to investigate. "Are you hungry?" she finally asked around 2 in the afternoon. I didn't want to eat with her. "No," I replied and pretended to be busy. She watched me from the kitchen, trying to figure out what was wrong with me, but I didn't feel like looking back. Any wife who had nothing to hide would have wondered why her husband had turned his back on her. Any wife who had nothing to worry about. "Maybe we should go out," I said suddenly, and stood up, reaching for my wallet, cell phone, and car keys. She looked surprised for a few seconds, then nodded and reached for her purse. She already had her cell phone in her hand, the same phone she held all the time. Debbie never let the phone out of her sight, and it was password protected. As we headed for the door, I let her pass and stared at the beautiful and young figure, a figure that until last night I thought of as my body. We always took my car when we went out together, so she moved to the passenger seat, waiting for me to open the door like I always did, given recent events. It was the last thing I wanted to do, but I forced myself to. Whatever happened before she left on Tuesday, I had to make sure she didn't suspect anything. I thought I might have already messed it up. "I'm sorry about today," I said. "I think I made a mistake on the project work and need to do some quick talking and corrections when I come in on Monday." "Oh," she exclaimed with relief, then caught herself and made a concerned look. "Johnson's project. She asked about the house I finished 3 weeks ago. So much for her attention during our conversations." "No," I replied, "something to do with a future project. I'll do new drawings this week and correct my mistake. Everything should be fine. I just hate making mistakes." "You're being too hard on yourself," she replied more calmly when I gave her the expected explanation. "Everyone makes mistakes," I almost said "that's for sure," but held back. We chatted about trivia and then about bills. Mentally, I was thinking about how to cope with where to go to bed. There was no way I was going to get away with falling asleep on the couch again. When we got home, I showered and went to bed with my tablet to read. But I think I stared at the same page for a full 30 minutes while Debbie showered and came out of the bathroom. She put her robe back on. This she did when she was naked under it, and meant sex. We had sex. I thought back to the last time we made love, the last time she was in love with me. She was lying next to me in her robe, but I kept reading or pretending to read. Putting her hand on my thigh, she moved closer. "Are you mad at me?" she finally said. I didn't answer, but turned to study her face. I wanted to see if she would give me a sign. "I found your pills in the bathroom." "You're taking them again?" She froze at my statement. "Yes, I know," she replied. "I'm really sorry about that. I thought we'd wait a few months." I nodded, not wanting to make a fuss. "No problem." I replied. "You're out of your mind," but it wasn't concern. It was more of a statement or annoyance. "No," I replied. "I don't want a baby right now either with you." I didn't say, but I thought she was silent for a few seconds, then removed her hand as I lay still. After a few minutes, she turned away from me and turned off the light on her side. I could hear her breathing and finally cried softly. It was all I could bear. I stood up, taking the clipboard with me, and walked out of the room. "Carson." I heard her words, but I closed the door and went back to the couch. The next morning when I got up, she was already awake and dressed. It was 6 o'clock in the morning and time for my morning run. She was already dressed for work. "I made you coffee," she said, and was about to say something but stopped. I guess she had already realized I was mad at her. "When did you find out about the pills?" she asked. I wanted to say just yesterday, but I didn't want her to think it was recent. "Last week," I lied. No longer caring that I was lying to her. "And you didn't tell me. You didn't bother to ask me what I thought about it." I said, "That's all. No problem, Deb, I replied. If you don't want a baby with me, then I don't want one. She wanted to say something, but I walked right past her. I'm late. I had to run. I needed solitude to clear my head. Running had always helped me focus and pull myself together. It started in junior high when I was in middle school. And then high school, the army, and then college. Running always cured my absent-mindedness and insecurity as a young man. And then as a man, now a married man, considering divorce in the evening, she came home and cooked dinner out of politeness. I sat down next to her and ate. I barely finished my plate, but I tried to be polite. Can we talk about the baby when I get home from my trip? She asked if you want. I answered, but all I could think about was what she'd said to Jenny. What happens outside the house means nothing. The next morning, she was waiting for me to wake up. She was dressed for traveling. Her travel bag was by the door along with her coat. Are you going to be okay while I'm gone? She asked. I'll survive, I replied. I always do, Carson. She said, I love you. I nodded politely. She saw the pain on my face and I saw her wince. I think I heard a sob as she ran out the door, leaving me to stare at her as I heard the car start and drive away. Training that day, I went to see a lawyer about the divorce since we had no children. All we had to do was divide all. The property accumulated since the first day of our marriage, but adultery factored into the division of property. We didn't have a prenup, which I now realize was stupid. But if the investigators found something useful, I could end up getting most of it. But the lawyers will fight over it in court and drag the case out to get more fees. What a mess. Jenny has been texting me and leaving me messages, but I wasn't ready to talk yet. Maybe I'll stop by to see her later, but she beat me to it and showed up at my work. She was waiting by my car. Why aren't you answering my calls and texts? She asked. I had something on my mind. I answered, take me to dinner and then home. She said, we need to talk. What happens when people aren't home means nothing. When I reminded her of that remark from my wife, Jenny nodded and looked directly at me. Where is she today? She asked. In San Diego. I answered. At least that's what she said. Did you call her at work? She asked. No. I answered, feeling stupid. Maybe you should have, she replied, because I did. For a while, I stared at her permission. The following Friday, Debbie returned from her trip. She drove to work first and then drove home. By then, I had already made dinner and set the table. Oh my goodness, honey, she exclaimed. You went all out. She ran up to kiss me. It wasn't a tongue kiss, but it was the type of kiss a husband and wife usually give each other, even in public. I let her kiss me, and it was a quick kiss. There was no awkward moment to worry about. In that moment, I thought that this kiss and her warm hand touching my arm would be our last. Trev and Jen are on their way here for dinner, I said, checking the stuffed peppers in the oven. Trev and Jen, she asked in surprise. Are they coming tonight? I understood her predicament. I thought you and I. She stopped talking as I turned and gave her a polite, disarming smile. I think I'll change and get ready. I watched her go into the bedroom to remove her business suit. She had gone to her last meeting in Omaha that morning, then flew home and walked by her office before returning. Understandably, she planned to shower, eat dinner, and get some rest. After all, she'd had a pretty long and stressful week, hadn't she? I checked my phone one last time for messages from Jen on the road. The email had been sent 5 minutes ago. At that moment, the upstairs shower turned off. If everything went right, Deb would be dressed soon, just in time for our guests. They're on their way. I called out to her, but there was no response. I could imagine why seeing them was the last thing she wanted. She came downstairs in jeans and a white tank top. The straps of her pink bra were visible underneath. She wore flip-flops like we both did when we vacationed at home, smiling nervously at me. She stepped closer and put her hand on my shoulder. What can I do for you? She asked. I have some wine chilling in the fridge, I answered, checking the stuffed peppers again. These will be ready in 15 minutes, tops. It smells good. She said, what that on the pot? Oro pasta, I replied. She had a sad look on her face as she nodded at my choice for dinner. It was a dish I had made for her on our last anniversary after we had discovered Greek food on a trip to Europe. Memories of those days of our honeymoon saddened me, but this evening had to happen, and this was part of it. The table was set for 4-2 on each side. She glimpsed him, then pulled a bottle of Zinfandel out of the fridge, opened it, and inhaled. Can I ask? She said before the doorbell rang. I'll get it, I said, and left her in the kitchen. I whispered to myself, showtime. I opened the door to our friends standing next to me. He looked a little anxious, nervous, but she gave me an understanding smile and then leaned over to kiss me right on the lips in front of him. Hello, stud. she said, pulling away and walking past me. I could tell that Trev wasn't surprised by our public display of affection. "Hi, Trev," I said with a smile. No, I didn't grin. "Come on in, Carson," he replied. Stepping inside, Jan and Debbie were already chatting in the kitchen. When we walked in for the first time in a long time, I noticed Trevor. As he looked around the room, his gaze darted from Jenny to Deb and back to me. He looked like a man trying to figure out what was going on. "We're having a European dinner sitting down," I announced. Jen is sitting with me and Deb is sitting with Trevor, and my wife gave me a quick glance and turned away as Jen giggled. "I think I like this. A European-themed evening from eating to sitting. What else do Europeans do?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. But Trev and Debbie didn't say anything back, sitting next to each other. I could tell they were on edge because Jen just kept talking to them, being herself. Inside, I wanted to laugh. Europeans share a lot more than just seats at the table. I replied with a smirk to Jen, who smirked back and then laughed. "They trade spouses or have open marriages. Interesting." Jen said, "What would you think of that, Trev?" He tensed. "I wouldn't like it," he replied. My wife flinched for a second and then looked away. "I don't know, Trev," Jen replied. "Maybe the Europeans have something about it once again." My wife and Trev just looked at us and gave us a furtive glance. After serving the food, I offered everyone a glass of wine and didn't give the two sitting across from us a chance to refuse. I simply filled their glasses. They would need them soon as we ate. Jen appreciated the choice of dish and how well it was prepared. Deb and Trevor politely agreed. You could tell they were being gracious, but they were both anxious. "How was your trip?" "Trev," I asked as we ate. Both he and my wife stopped eating at the same time. It would have been funny if it wasn't sad to see the pain of the realization was hurting more and more with each passing minute. Only Jen's hand on my thigh calmed me down. It wasn't a sexual touch, but soothing and caring. It's all the same. He said, "Meet the customers and our representatives in the region, then go to the next town and do it again, you Deb." Jenny asked, same as Trev. She replied, "We both do much of the same work, but for different companies and clients." By this time, they were both picking at their food again. It was funny, if not sad. I tried to ignore it and filled their glasses again when we finished, meaning we stopped eating. Because both my wife and Trev had lost their appetites, Jan and I picked up our plates. Debbie offered to help, but I stopped her. "You and Trev just got back from your trip. Go sit in the living room and we'll be there in a few minutes, okay?" she said with a startled look and a fake smile. Despite the tension, Trev wanted to say something to his wife, but she left to go to the bathroom. I watched them walk into the living room, casting questioning glances at each other. They might have been whispering, but I couldn't make out what they were talking about. But I could imagine they were worried. When Jen returned, she and I joined them. "So, you guys aren't interested in an open European marriage?" I said with a smirk. Jen joined me. Laughing, Debbie and Trev only giggled nervously, as if it was a joke. "That's too bad." Jenny added, teasing me, "They're such prudes. How about we watch something I came across this week? I think you'll like it." "Is it a chick flick movie?" Jen asked with feigned enthusiasm. "It has both male and female aspects to it," I replied, turning the TV on the wall and going to the file I had saved on my hard drive. The first scene showed street scenes from a city with lots of sunlight in the coast. Then it turned around to show the naval base as the car drove north and stopped behind a cab stopped in front of a hotel. Trev hesitated a bit, but Debbie recognized the hotel just before the video showed first Trev and then her getting out of the cab and entering the hotel hand in, and by this time the shock was reflected on their faces. The camera followed them as they checked in and then walked to the elevator with their luggage, and each other they held hands again, and as the elevator door closed, they leaned in for a kiss. "Carson, can you stop?" Trevor said. But Jen stopped him coldly. "Shut up and watch," she said in a cold voice. "Both of you." When I turned to look at my wife, her face reflected panic and shame. I saw her lips quiver as she tried to look away from the screen. After that, the scene changed to the inside of a hotel room, and yes, our stars gave a show. Deb and Trev were both naked, and she was on her knees when I turned to look at my crying wife. I couldn't help myself, and here I thought, "You were going to cheat with your big buddy," I said, __. "You, Carson." Finally, TR spoke up, but he didn't say anything when Jen slapped him and gave him a hard stare. And finally, I said, narrating the show as if watching a nature show, "The cheater lies on the bed, spread out, waiting for the cheater to enter her with his average penis. The scene now consisted of Trav between my wife's legs. I then turned up the sound. "Yes, take me like this," said my dear wife. Trev just grunted. The video sped up to show them later when they got their second win before he went to the bathroom. "That was good." Trev said there, "Does he give it to you that good?" Sometimes my wife replied as her mood changed. "I told you not to mention Carson when we do this. Why wouldn't I?" "Bad conscience," he said, coming back into the room. "I just don't want to talk about him." "You're killing the mood, Trev," she replied. After that, they lay on the bed and the video went on for almost an hour. Both of them took a nap. Deb was the first to wake up and lay there turning away from Trevor. Then he woke up and reached for her. She didn't resist and let him roll her over onto her stomach as he placed a pillow under her hips. She handed him a tube of lube, which he took. Jen, who had seen the video before, looked at her husband with cold, hard eyes. He was angry but resigned to seeing evidence of his betrayal to his wife. For her part, my wife stopped watching and sobbed quietly into her hands. The next scene was of Trevor going in and out of my wife several times. Shortly after that, they fell asleep. The video stopped for a second and moved to the next morning when they slept together again, and then took a shower before separating. They were both in San Diego at that moment. The screen went blank and I stopped it. Trevor stared at me angrily as Jen got up and came over to sit next to me. "Well," she said, "that was pretty enlightening, wasn't it?" Debbie finally looked at me. "How did you find out?" was all she asked. I turned the screen back on as I expected. She and Jen were talking in our kitchen last week. "Jen, is it true what they say about people on business trips having sex, Deb? I wouldn't worry too much. Jen, Trev always comes over to your house, doesn't he, Jen?" "Yeah, but I wonder what he does when he's alone, if he's alone. Deb, Jen, he comes home to you. Don't pay attention to what happens when he's gone." "Jen, what do you mean, Deb?" "Deb, exactly. What I said. What happens when people aren't home means nothing. What happens outside the house means nothing. What happens outside the house means nothing. What happens when people are out of the house means nothing for good measure." I replayed that last sentence 3 times for them. "That's what happened, Deb. I said that's what gave you away. It made me think you were cheating on me. I didn't know with whom, but then I knew it was you. I already had my suspicions." Jen interjected, "The way you two always managed to cross paths on your trips, the way you sometimes avoided each other in conversation." She stopped and turned to me. It was funny how tonight they were feeling guilty and constantly checking each other out. "You were both pathetic. I've hired investigators in all 4 cities you traveled to." I said. She wrinkled her nose and shook her head. She sobbed again, knowing more was about to follow. The next video was Deb with another man in a bar and then walking toward a hotel room, grabbing ass along the way. Inside the room, she did something similar with this man, kneeling and sucking and then taking his __ with her ass. "You __." Trevor shouted at her, "You cheated on me, Jen," and I laughed as we saw his outburst and the desperation on my wife's face. They stared at each other and then back at us. "But wait," I pointed out Riley, "that's not all." The video continued. Trevor was in a room in Las Vegas with a slender and muscular Negro woman. Trevor must have developed an anal fixation because he had the woman there and then later took her in the ass again. "My husband never does that to me," said the Negro. "Woman, glad I could help," Trevor replied as he entered the bathroom and could hear the Negro woman wiping his __ off her ass with a napkin, unable to contain myself. I clapped my hands together. Debbie just shook her head in disgust. "That's adorable," Jen said then. "Cheaters cheating each other. Priceless footage after that." We all fell silent, everyone in their own thoughts. Deb was the first to speak. "Carson," she said, looking at me with trembling lips and voice, "where does that leave us?" It was then that I turned and looked at her seriously. "You know, I said to them both, and I have had a few days to come to an agreement and talk. We're both agreeable people. In fact, we're both not prudes. If either or both of you had brought up our exchange, we would have agreed honestly. I thought about asking you, Deb. But you chose a different path, didn't you? You could have asked me openly and honestly, so we could have made that decision and gone down that path together. Instead, you chose the selfish way of doing what you like and keeping me in the dark. You chose to lie and betray me. You betrayed us, Debbie. How do I forgive that? How do I get past you going behind my back and thinking you have the right to do whatever you want when you're traveling well, and not just when traveling? How long before you started doing it here? I bet they've already done it." Jen said, "I was told at his work that your dear wife has taken him out to lunch a few times." Debbie turned away. "Trevor did too." "So what do you want?" Trevor finally asked. Well, said Jen, it looks like we have everything we need for the two of you. Neither of us have children, so all we have to worry about is dividing up our assets. And since adultery can be used in court in Texas, you're both pretty much screwed, literally. Give me your cell phones, both of you. I said open them. Deb flinched, but held it out unlocked. Trevor stammered, but Jen walked over and just snatched the cell phone from him. It's not locked, she said, holding it out to me. Give me a minute. I'll check his cloud account. It took her a few minutes, during which time I checked Deb's phone. She hadn't put anything down either, but I glimpsed through her gallery to find pictures with Trev and the other man. There were pictures of the men's, __, and a couple videos. Cool, Deb, I told her, shaking my head when she looked away. So this is how it's going to go down. I'll never be able to trust again. Too many lies and too long while I was talking. Jen called let go, she said, and turned to look at what was happening. You both work for companies that have standards of morality. Have you forgotten that I could see the near panic on their faces? Both your bosses and their legal departments would be very disappointed in your antics. One of them is a skirt chaser himself, but his company had to pay for one of his indiscretions, so now he lets his HR and legal departments go after those who break the rules that must be your boss. Trevor, __. He muttered, that's what got you in trouble, __. Jen told him, I've given you everything you've ever asked for in bed. I let you have my face like $1 too, __. You stabbed me in the back. Trevor, it's over between us. Well, not yet. What do you mean? Well, I picked up the story, divorces are a given, and you'll both sign papers giving us 70% of the assets. If you fight us, the videotape of your speeches will go to your families and friends as well as your employers. Carson, Debbie looked at me pleadingly. Please don't, why don't we try to work this out? Really, Deb, I grinned. If you saw the video of me, __, Jen behind your back, would you try to figure it out? Please give me a chance. I did. Deb, I snapped back you and I got in trouble before you left on your __, tour. And you decided to do it anyway. You decided to start taking the pills without talking to me. We're married. We decided to live together and make decisions together. You betrayed me and my trust before you even slept with him, and anyone else. You lost respect for me, so it was easy for you. I just want to know one thing, why she looked away. Then looked at me again before you... I'd never had any experience with other men. One guy came over in less than a minute, Carson. That was my experience before you. I wanted to try others and see what it was like. I stared at her incredulously. You should have thought about that before you married me, I replied. It's when people try others, not after they get married. Marriage isn't just a commitment, it's a contract between two people. It means the two of them against the world. And that marriage is exclusive until both parties agree to it. You know about leaving everyone else behind. She wanted to say something, but stopped, then spoke. Carson, I wanted to go out and have some fun before the wedding, but you showed up, and I didn't want to risk losing you. Things were so good between us for the first few years, but this last year it all came back to me. I started wondering what other men would be like. Not love, I had you for that. Just sex, that's all I wanted. I shook my head disappointedly. All you had to do was ask me, Deb. All you had to do was talk to me here at home. We could have found people we know and trust. Hell, I would have let you, __, that, __. If we had all decided to do it together since we were all friends, instead you two went behind our backs and violated our trust. Debbie, along with trust and love comes RESP, ECT. You lost all respect for me to go behind my back. We could have worked this out together, but you chose to do it without me. Jen nodded along with me in agreement. That goes for you too, Trev, she said. Especially after the way we talked, it was my turn to look at her in surprise as Trevor turned away, and Debbie looked at Jen and Trevor in shock. Did you do that? She asked. What did he say? The bastard told me he'd never share me with Carson and would leave me if I brought it up again or he caught me. Can you believe that? Debbie shook her head, looking at Trevor, and then pushed back and punched him. You stupid bastard, she said as he tried to cover himself from a second and third punch. When we started, I said we had to bring them in, didn't I? But you said no, that they'd never pull it off and leave us. I listened to you, and now where are we? You've turned into a cheater, Deb. It didn't take long, he said angrily. And after me, you started sleeping with other people, so don't act like a saint to me. I remember our first kiss at Christmas last year. You let me kiss you for a minute or two when Jen was in the bathroom and Carson went out to the car. It didn't take me long to get you into bed. In fact, less than a week. I thought back to that night. Everything seemed so perfect, a holiday with our best friends. And while his wife and I were out of sight, he and my wife were kissing. I, __. Hate you, she said back to him. It's pretty damn mutual, wench. He replied. Jen and I watched them flaming at each other for a few minutes. We looked at them with contempt and disbelief. Was there any hope after that? It looked hopeless, too many lies and too much betrayal along the way. If we had children or were older, I might have been weak and thought about it. But I was young and there were no children to tie us to each other. I wanted to leave. The doorbell rang again. This time Jen opened it. She returned with a woman carrying 2 bags and a smartphone. Deborah Madison Kane, she asked my wife, who nodded. You have been served. She handed her an envelope and took her picture. Trevor Gunderson. She asked Trev, who reluctantly nodded. You have been served. Debbie was now openly sobbing with papers in her hands. Jen turned to me and shrugged, then walked over to her husband. It's over between us. Go home, pack up your stuff and get out. I never want to see you again. Do you understand? If you say anything to me, the video goes to your parents, your job, and anyone else you can call a friend. You got it. Deb didn't move, but then she turned to me and did something I didn't expect. She got down on her knees and crawled over to me and Jen. I'm begging you both, please forgive me and give me another chance. I know I screwed up. It's all my fault. Do whatever you want to do to me. Just don't throw me out on the street. Carson, please. Jen, please talk to him. I'm begging you both. Debbie looked pleadingly into my eyes. I knew immediately that this was my test as a man. Yes, I loved her. No matter how betrayed I felt, I still loved her. But still, what she did was unforgivable, but I felt that throwing her out just like that would be wrong, but I'll never trust her again. Jen's moving in here and into my bedroom, I said, looking her in the eye. I saw her wince. I understand, she said, suppressing a sob. I deserved it. I need to talk to her about you, okay? The door closed, Trevor left, and Jen returned. What are you going to do with her? She asked. You know she can't be trusted, do you? I know, I answered. I'm not going to. Debbie looked at each of us in despair. Please, was all she said. Shut up, Jen replied and pushed her back down to the floor. Debbie lay like that for a second or two and then got back on her knees. Carson, please don't divorce me, Debbie. That ship has sailed, I said, looking down at her. We're getting a divorce, but there will be a legal separation for 3 months. You have exactly that long to convince me you're worth saving. In the meantime, I'll be living with Jen. She'll be in my bedroom, what used to be yours. Do you understand? What do you want me to do, Carson? She asked me dutifully. Well, for one thing, you have to beg Jen to give you a chance. If she doesn't, you're finished. Debbie nodded and turned to stand. UPG on your knees. Deb, I said go to her on your knees. Beg her to give you a chance to redeem yourself for __. Her husband, go. I watched her crawl on her knees to Jen, who stood there in her gorgeous, slim, long-legged figure, brown hair, and high apple-sized breasts with thick nipples. I had enjoyed her so much the last 2 nights and planned to do it again. Jen, I'm so sorry, she said. __. Debbie Jen replied. You're just sorry you got caught. I know it looks that way, Jen, but there's no buts. Jen snapped back. You betrayed my trust, just like you betrayed your husband's. You two deserve each other. If it were up to me, I'd kick you out. But this isn't my house, and soon it won't be your home. My advice would be to find a cheap motel for the night, for the weekend, and then look for an apartment to move into. You need some time to think about what you've done. Debbie turned to me as if I could save her, but I just stared at her, not backing away an inch. Get your stuff and go, Debbie. I told her, pack your stuff for at least a week, and we'll talk about how you'll get the rest when you need it. When she nodded and sobbed again, her face reflected dejection and sad agreement. She rose slowly and went to the bedroom to get her things. 40 minutes later, she had packed 2 suitcases, a travel bag, a laptop bag, and a purse. Jen and I watched her load everything into her car, standing side by side. As she stopped for the last time, she reached for me, but I pulled away. She sobbed again and drove away in tears. It went better than we thought. Jen said, leaning toward me, they brought this on themselves, I added as we watched my soon-to-be ex-wife's car drive off into the distance. Every spouse has the opportunity to cheat. Not all of them do. It's funny, she said, as she walked back with me. What's so funny? I asked Jen as she undressed. Some people think they have an open marriage, but they forget to tell their spouse. As she pulled off my pants and boxers, I felt her hand grab my boyfriend, who until last week had belonged to Debbie. "Do you want an open relationship?" she asked when I pulled away. "It's too much like dating other people." I replied, "Do you need that? I just need a change every once in a while." "Carson, it's been a while since I've tried some variety, then I might need another girl sometimes." I replied, "Deal," she said, panting. Now take me 3 months later, the divorce took place. Both Jen and I got the 70% I asked for. Jen sold her house, and I took out a loan to pay Debbie 30% of the house she owned in one day in court. All the financial and legal issues were resolved, but not Debbie's pain and guilt she lost. Everything but her job. Her parents eventually found out when she started setting them up in case I sent them videos and pictures out of spite. I never did. Trevor just disappeared after his divorce from Jen was final. She had enough money to buy him out, but the last thing he told her was that he would be in touch. It's been 2 years now, and we haven't heard from him. Debbie is still working and traveling. What she does doesn't bother me anymore. The other day, Jen and I were at a coffee shop, and she walked by busy on her phone. Jen and I live together, but we are both afraid of serious commitment. It's been a year since my divorce, and my memories of my time with Debbie are fading. Jen and I talk about traveling around the world, or at least we've been talking. That damned virus from Wuhan, China ruined our plans to see faraway places. So we're both on vacation and doing nothing but running, walking, and having sex like rabbits. But I'm still scared, so is she who wouldn't be scared after what we've been through? The other day, I got an email from Debbie. "Hi Carson, I hope you're, well, I'm trying to live my new life, but honestly, it's not easy. I miss our time together. I miss you and us. I had so much time to think about what I did to you, to me, and to us. I blew it thinking I deserved to have everything I wanted, no matter what it was, in my pursuit of sexual experimentation, indulging my desires and self-fulfillment. I hurt the man I loved and lost my marriage, not to mention helping to destroy Jenny and Trevor's marriage. It would be so easy to blame him for what happened. But we all know that's not true. Everything I've done willingly. No one forced me. I owe you an apology. Carson, not only for ruining our marriage and our life together, but for, as you said, losing respect for you. But before I did that, I lost respect for myself. I succumbed to the belief that I deserved the pleasure and got over the fact that I missed out on everything. Now I have an experience under my belt that I never counted on divorce. Nothing about it, nothing at all appealing or satisfying. He tore me apart. I hear you and Jen are still together. I wish you both happiness, but to say I'm not jealous would be a lie. Take care of yourself, and Jen, your unfortunately ex-wife, love, Debbie. P.S. 2 things: being alone sucks. What happens outside means a lot. It's funny how people can underestimate the consequences of their actions. My name is Ryan. The best way to describe me is to say I'm a lover and a man with mild manners who gives his wife everything she wants. It took me 2 marriages, but now I finally realized that being reserved and giving everything to the one you love can lead to contempt and disrespect that will never happen again. These spoiled women think they can do something and hide it from their partners as long as they never find out. All is well. They hide their guilt in various ways until they get caught, and then they suddenly regret it and explain that they didn't want their spouse to find out and get hurt. Do they even hear themselves speak? What are we supposed to think when they say they never meant for you to find out? Do they realize that they are admitting they are doing it behind your back and are only sorry they got caught? What an insult that is. I am convinced that these women cannot understand normal thinking Sandy and I met at. After we broke up from a dysfunctional relationship, she spent 3 years with her boyfriend, and Billy left her for a younger, more attractive girl. Sandy left the relationship hurt and with self-esteem issues because of being dumped by the man she loved. She never got over Billy, and that always bothered me on some level. My name is Ryan, and I'm 6 years older than Sandy. I was married for 5 years to an amazingly hot, sexy woman who rocked my world. I was madly in love with her and expected to spend the rest of my life with my ex-wife, Charlotte. However, she had made several lovers behind my back. At a time when I was completely enamored with her, it took me a year of her cheating to find out about her infidelity, and it hurt me deeply. I left her and swore I would never let it happen again. After that, I realized that trust would be an issue for me in any new relationship. Sandy and I knew about each other's baggage. I helped Sandy overcome her self-esteem issues. She went to the gym and gave her body an amazing AM in figure. She spent all her free time shopping for new clothes, spending hours at the beauty parlor, and on the tennis courts with my help and support. She transformed into a confident, beautiful woman, in turn, knowing my story. Sandy worked hard to help me overcome my confidence issues. She always let me know that I was her one and only love and how lucky she was to have found me every day. She made sure to tell me how much she loved me and made sure all my wishes were fulfilled. The sex was still great, and we still did it at least 4 times a week. We still kissed and cuddled on the couch and loved each other. We even started talking about kids. We were each other's soulmates. Life was good. At least I thought so. A week after our 6th anniversary, my world turned upside down. I noticed my wife wearing a dress I hadn't seen before and looking spectacular, which was odd for a late weekday morning now. I wasn't spying on my wife, but we have a video surveillance system at home that I occasionally watch when I'm bored at work. I enjoy watching our dog, Brandy, my little dachshund, as she has become a stress reliever after my stressful job as a bond broker. However, when I saw the live video feed that morning, I was curious. There was the love of my life in a very short, sexy red dress and very high heels. Her hair was styled and her makeup was amazing. I hadn't seen her look this sexy in years, which made my stomach twist, and I was worried. I immediately called my loving wife to see if I could find out what she was up to. I dialed her number on my cell phone. "Hey, babe, just sitting here thinking about you. How's your day going tennis today? Hey, honey, I miss you. I don't have anything planned for today. No tennis today because Kara hurt her ankle, so I'm taking the day off. Oh, that's too bad. I know how much you love to play. What are you going to do then? I'm not sure. I don't have anything planned. Maybe I'll go to the gym. Would you like to meet for lunch? I can stop by the house and pick you up. That's so sweet, sweet, babe. But not today. I'm a little bloated, and I'm not really hungry right now. I'll just have a protein shake at the gym. I'll see you tonight. I love you, baby." I said goodbye without my usual, "I love you." I'm sure she caught that because I always say I love you before we end our calls. She lied to me, and I need to find out why. Of course, some things die hard. And although I trusted Sandy after all these years, I still had a GPS tracker in her car that I rarely used. I had originally put it there for security, but unfortunately, I was now using it to spy on my wife. As soon as I hung up the phone, I walked out of my office, went to my car, and turned on her tracker. She was heading downtown, and I drove in that direction. My office was near downtown, and 15 minutes later, I caught up with her, noticing her pulling into the parking garage I parked on the street, and waited in the doorway for her to exit the garage. 5 minutes later, my beautiful wife, in her high heels and sexy dress, was heading toward Felina's, an upscale restaurant. I stood there feeling my stomach clench and prayed I hadn't been duped by another woman. When I saw her waving to a man in front of the restaurant, I knew I was in trouble. I scooted closer, trying to stay out of sight, and saw him greet her with a kiss. They exchanged a few words as he took her hand and walked inside. I quickly crossed the street and watched through the window as they stood in front of the hostess with their arms around each other's waists. I noticed Sandy leaning lovingly on his shoulder. Tears began to fill my eyes until anger rose up in me. I wiped my eyes, pulled out my phone, and started taking some pictures through the window. As I started snapping them, I saw him turn to Sandy and kiss her passionately. I took some pictures just as she was responding to him with a reciprocal kiss. My heart broke when she put her arms around his neck and pulled him even deeper. At that moment, I turned on the video camera and captured their loving kiss. The combination of pain in my heart and rage in my head led me down a dark path before I could decide what to do. The hostess LED them to their table. My blood boiled when I recognized the man, and it was Billy, her ex-boyfriend, the guy who dumped her and ruined her life. And now she was back in his arms. She knew how I felt about him, and that I had made it clear to her that she should never speak to him again. She clearly did not agree with my wishes. My anger took over when I realized that in just the last hour, she had lied to me, dressed sexily to meet her ex, kissed him passionately, and is spending the entire day with him. That level of disrespect and humiliation was unacceptable, and it was something I could no longer live with. The promise I made to myself after my last marriage prevented me from being patient, and accepting that level of disrespect. It was over. And all that was left was to hear more lies and excuses from my soon-to-be ex-wife, still full of anger. I drove back to the office and finished the day at my desk trying to figure out how this could have happened again. After feeling sorry for myself for the next 5 hours, I headed home, already knowing my next move. I wondered if Sandy would tell me the truth about her day, or continue to deceive me, as it would make my final move easier. With a lot of effort, I was able to suppress my anger and drove home to face the dissolution of my marriage. As I turned into the driveway of my house, I felt myself crying over the loss of the woman I loved and respected. Sandy was setting the table with a delicious dinner, was dressed in a nice outfit, and was acting very affectionate toward me when I entered the kitchen. She gave me a big kiss and told me how much she missed me. Typical cheating wife, I thought Thea was trying to ease her guilt and make it up to me by showing more love than she had in the last 6 months, as much as I tried to act normal. It obviously wasn't working when she looked at me and asked, "Honey, are you okay? Did anything happen?" I poured myself a tall glass of Mr. Daniels, tried to smile and relax, and said, "I'm fine, it's just been a busy day. Let me get changed and cleaned up for dinner, and I'll be down shortly." In the bedroom, I changed and sat on the bed, finishing my drink and letting the elixir wash over my body. After calming down, I went down to the kitchen and saw my beautiful wife smiling and happy with dinner set on the table. She was in a great mood, clearly happy with the day she had spent with her boyfriend. As we sat there together, I struck up a conversation. "This is a wonderful dinner. Sandy, and you dressed so beautifully for me today." "Thank you, I love you, honey, and I love cooking for you," she said with a satisfied smile. We sat in awkward silence for a few minutes while we ate. I noticed Sandy looking at me, wondering what was bothering me. Did she feel guilty? Would she tell me the truth about today? "I'll find out in the next few minutes, so tell me about your day and what you did for dinner," I said with no threat in my voice. "Well, after you called, I went to the gym for a few hours, ate a protein bar, and then came home to make you dinner. Pretty boring day," she offered. As an answer, she saw my face and noticed my eyes filled with tears and quickly lowered her gaze to her plate in a quiet voice. I said, "So Sandy, how are we going to do this? Do we just meet with the lawyers, or do you want to see a counselor first? What you talking about, honey? About divorce, of course." I replied, "Stop being stupid. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the end of our marriage, divorce, separation, figuring out how we can do this and still be friends. I don't understand. Why do you want a divorce, really? I'll give you a few minutes to think about your question before I answer." Suddenly, she became nervous. Her hands nervously rubbed her glass, and she no longer looked me in the eye. She was silent for a few minutes. "Were you following me tonight?" "No," I lied, knowing it didn't really matter, but for some reason I didn't want her to know. "Why are you asking me if I followed you? Is there anything I should know?" I could tell she was still confused and didn't know what to say, like, all cheaters, they deny it as expected. She said nothing was going on and she didn't understand anything. "Why are you asking me about the divorce?" with a sad expression on my face. I looked into her eyes for a long time, hoping she would open up and tell me the truth. After a long silence, I said, "Well, let me show you what's bothering me, Sandy." I opened my phone and showed her one picture of her and Billy kissing when they met outside the restaurant. That picture could be explained as a friendly kiss, as a greeting. I didn't want to show her the other pictures until I heard more of her lies. Her jaw dropped, and I saw tears come to her eyes. She'd made excuses. "Of course, honey, I can explain. It was just a hello kiss. Nothing happened. How did you get this picture?" "So how's Billy doing these days, baby? I'll tell you how I got this picture. I was crossing the street coming out of a software store. When I thought I noticed you walking hand in hand into a restaurant, I crossed the street and walked over to the window to see you standing there with him putting one arm around you. My first thought was that it wasn't you, but of course I was wrong. It was you. My second thought was, why is she wearing that sexy dress and high heels? She never dresses like that for me anymore." Then I noticed that you were with Billy, and everything immediately fell into place. I started taking some pictures just as you leaned over and kissed him. And that's how I got this picture. In the next picture I showed her, she had her arms around his neck and her short dress was scooting up to her ass, which was on display. You really looked sexy in that dress, and your hair and makeup looked spectacular. Were you on your way to a modeling shoot, or were you getting a job as a prostitute? Tell me, why did you dress like that for him? I can't remember the last time you wore something this sexy for me." She put her head in her hands and cried, and I stared at her intently, waiting for an answer. When she remained silent, I continued. "You know, my new S22 phone has an amazing camera, and it allows me to zoom in with great clarity. Look, let me show you, I said, moving closer to her left arm, which was wrapped around Billy's neck. I zoomed in on her ring finger, which now had no wedding rings on it, and brought the image up to her face. No wedding rings today. Funny, I don't remember you ever taking them off in all the time we've been together today. Must have been a really special day. Now, do you see why I'm talking about divorce, honey? You lied to me this morning about your day. You took off your wedding rings. You dressed like a to meet your old lover and lied to me again about your day. A few minutes ago, you sit here and keep lying to my face and telling me you went to the gym today and ate nothing for lunch. You put on your sexiest outfit for your ex-lover and spent the day with him while I work on making our lives better. You broke your promise to never see him again. You kissed and flirted with another man in public. You treated me like a fool and just lied to me. I don't know if you slept with him tonight or whatever, but it really doesn't matter. Whatever you say in my mind, it will be a lie. But what you did showed me that you don't keep your promises and you will lie to me to cover things up. You tried your best to look good for your ex-lover. You were intimate with him and gave up on your marriage by taking off your rings, and then you lied to me over and over again. Seems to me that's a good reason for divorce, and you know it. Sandy was shaken to the core. She had just realized that she hadn't really thought this through, and the way Ryan was talking it all out made her feel like a cheating wife. Up until this point, she'd just considered it a little teasing and flirting, nothing serious. For the first time since Billy had rode her, she realized that this had escalated into an emotional relationship and could easily be seen as cheating on her husband, albeit not physical, but certainly emotional. She was still crying and knew that if this had been her husband's affair, she would have behaved the same way. "What have I done?" she said to herself. Her heart ached, and she felt nauseous in her stomach because of the pain she had caused her husband. She had to get through to Ryan and save this marriage, Ryan. You have to believe me. Nothing happened. We went our separate ways after dinner, but you have to believe me, nothing happened. It was just lunch, she said, sobbing and looking for a way out. I realize now what it looks like, and if things had been different, I would feel the same way you do now, and I'm so sorry. Can you please try to forgive my stupidity? It's beyond stupid since you did this to your ex-lover, the one person you promised to avoid. Can you explain why you dressed like that for him without your wedding rings? Can you explain why you held hands and kissed him? Can you explain why you kept lying to my face? Tell me, darling, does it mean nothing to you? And yes, if it were the other way around, I'm sure you'd feel very differently, Ryan. I know this looks bad, but I took my rings off while I was painting my nails. I forgot them when I realized I was late. It sounds lame and I can't apologize for it, but I can only promise you that I wasn't trying to hide them. He knows we're married, he knows you're married, but he still wants to see you and kiss you passionately in public, and you agreed to everything. That's a lame excuse, dating your ex-lover behind my back, and lying about it is, in my opinion, a deal breaker. A little annoyed, she said, I'm not sure what to say other than it was just lunch with a friend, and I just wanted to look nice. Well, it doesn't matter. You lied to me and went out with him. What do you think? I'm a complete idiot. I know this meeting should have been planned ahead of time, and you kept it from me without even bothering to mention it. And when I saw the two of you kissing like that, it was clear you wanted more than I could give you, Ryan, honey. We can't get divorced over something like this. Nothing happened. He was in town, and he asked me to lunch. I know I shouldn't have gone, and I know how jealous you are, but we had a long relationship. I figured one lunch after not seeing him for so many years wouldn't be a big deal. I guess I dressed special to show him what he was missing when he left me. I kind of wanted to tell him right to his face about what he lost and how happy I was. It still hurts when I remember how he left me back then, and I wanted a little revenge. Yes, I kissed him, but it wasn't a romantic kiss, but more like two friends just meeting or saying goodbye. You have to believe me, I don't want anything to do with him. Please, baby, let's work this out. I'll do whatever you want, you will. That doesn't mean anything, you'll do anything I want. Hearing that she had a chance to save the marriage, she smiled, wanting to hear what she had to do, and said yes. Of course I'll do whatever you want me to do, baby. Okay, Sandy, I'll give you one chance and one chance only. I just have one request. Let me see your cell phone. Why, she looked at me with a puzzled expression. Well, Sandy, if that doesn't mean anything, then let me see your cell phone. I want to see if there are any text messages for it and what you two have been saying to each other. No, you don't need to see that, she said, looking down at the floor. She knew that if I read the messages, it would hurt me and reveal a lot of things she didn't want me to see. That's exactly what I thought. So let's go back to my original question. How do we want to do this? Want to? She started crying and asking me to forgive her and that she would never do it again. It brought back heartbreaking memories of my first marriage. I couldn't believe I was reliving that nightmare again. This time, I wasn't going to believe all the lies and let things continue. Wait. Please wait, Ryan. If I give you the phone, will you promise to give me another chance? You have to know that I love you and I've never cheated on you before. I may have gotten caught up in a stupid online relationship, and yes, with my ex-lover, but I was stupid and acting like a teenage girl. The flirting and compliments were nice, and it all rubbed off on my ego. I know how childish that sounds. If I give you the phone, you have to promise me you'll give me another chance. I can't do that, Sandy, but I promise you if you don't give me the phone, we're 100% done. My next action will be to call Mark Wilson, the attorney I've already spoken to, and I'll have him draw up the divorce papers this week. She knew there was no other choice, and she knew exactly what I would be reading their romantic texts from the past 2 months. All she could hope for now was that I realized it was a stupid emotional mistake, and she still belonged to me completely. She still believed that since there had been no sex, I would understand and forgive her. In her mind, she needed to let me know that she had never had physical sex with him or anyone else when Ryan opened the text messaging app. He saw Sandy sitting with her arms wrapped around her head, crying and saying quietly, I'm sorry, please forgive me for being stupid and an idiot. I love you, Ryan, and there is no one else." The text messages said very different things. The ones that really hit him hard were from Sandy to Bill. I still love you was the first phrase that cut like a knife. I missed you was another that triggered his anger. The rest of it was as one would expect. They discussed old times and how they missed being together. But the last few messages had hit Ryan hard between the eyes when she told Billy that her marriage was outdated and that she was bored, and Billy said he missed her marvelous and couldn't wait for them to be one. It hurt so badly he wanted to scream. But her response made him nauseous when he saw a picture of her shaved with the comment, "My little he can't wait," causing Ryan to slam his phone shut in disgust and throw it on the table. Well, that opened my eyes in the end. I'll forgive you, Sandy, but I'm not staying married to someone I can't trust. And it's clear by your actions that I can't trust you. What I just read is what I expected and something I will not allow myself to live with. Maybe your boyfriend can make your life more exciting and maybe he'll take you back now that he knows what he's been missing, Sandy. I will miss you, but I will find a woman who wants to be exclusive to me and won't disrespect me with lies and secrets. Ryan, what do I have to do to prove my love to you and make you change your mind? Nothing. When I saw you walking hand in hand with him, standing there, and him putting his arms around you and kissing you, my heart broke now. Knowing that you send pictures of your and tell him you still love him and then tell him you're sick of our marriage was more than any normal man could handle. It's sad, but I feel like all our time together was wasted, and I was nothing but a fool, working hard, planning a family, taking care of you in our home, only to find you dating an ex-lover. Do you realize that if you told me the truth when I asked you about your day, how could I possibly understand it? I mean, I can almost understand what you may have wanted to do based on that story, but the problem is that you kept it from me and lied about it. No. I know that if I hadn't found out, you never would have told me. That's the problem, baby. Tell me I'm wrong. And you'd tell me all about your date with your ex-lover after you got home. Don't worry, I already know the answer. Trust, loyalty, and honesty are my core values, and you trampled on them without a second thought. You knew how it happened to me in the past, and yet you did it without thinking about us. If you had called me and told me what you were doing, I wouldn't have been happy, but I would have let you go to lunch now. I have to wonder if you've done this before, if we stayed together. I'd have to wonder if what you're telling me is true. What do you do when I'm not around? Are you with him or with other men? I can't spend my days with these thoughts, and it's not fair to either of us. How can I just forget how easily you lied to me? Yes, kissing him and looking sexy for him is disturbing. Not wearing wedding rings is harmful, but lying and conniving is unacceptable. What I do know is that I'm not going to live like this anymore, Ryan. You're right, and I made a stupid mistake. I lied because I knew you'd be mad, but I had to do it even if it was a mistake. I needed a way to calm down. I thought one lunch and I'd get my revenge, no harm, no foul. But now I see what I've done, and I'm truly sorry for it. I would never do anything to hurt you. I promise, can we work on that? I want to be transparent and open like you. My problem is that I never want to hurt anyone and will avoid it if possible. Now I see where not being honest is actually worse. Well, honesty and transparency are the only things that could have saved this marriage. But you weren't transparent and honest until you were forced into submission. The fact that you wouldn't let me read your text messages until you realized you had no other choice decided your fate. Tears rolled down her face as she sat there knowing how those texts exposed her dishonesty and lack of trust. She knew I wouldn't accept it, and eventually realized that her emotional relationship with another man was just as destructive as if she had gotten him into bed. She told herself she would never make a mistake like that again. Sadly, our happy marriage came to an end. We signed the papers and were officially divorced. 3 months later, we sold the house, split our money, and parted as friends. No reconciliation, no revenge or hatred. All that remained were the smoldering ashes of a once happy marriage destroyed by deceit, lies, and loss of trust. I continued to date, but after getting burned twice, marriage was not in my future. Sandy and Billy hooked up, and 2 months later, Sandy got pregnant. Billy dumped Sandy as soon as he heard about the pregnancy and told her to take care of it because he wasn't ready for children. The next morning, Billy disappeared, leaving Sandy with the baby in her arms. I heard from her sister Debbie that she was just a shell of her former self. Her self-esteem was once again compromised. Sandy remained in a constant state of depression when she lost her baby after a violent fall down a long flight of stairs in her apartment. Her life had gone from paradise to sheer hell, all because of her vanity and selfishness. She just couldn't forgive herself for ruining our happy marriage and losing my love and respect. Trust, loyalty, respect. You screw up one, you lose all three.